We are back and we are officially done with the provisional statement of account, measure and mass. Now we move on to the last section in this chapter called the unique character of the structure, so additional cross sections. So more charts. We love our charts here at the Idols of the Cave channel. So let's dig right into it. Excuse me. Two difficulties present themselves in these deliberations with which we must contend. The first is inherent in the demand of any treatise for a sequential presentation, which is necessarily contrary to the simultaneity of an integral mode. In a given moment where we must deal with various strata of the problems at hand, not merely the various aspects, but the very problems themselves tend to intersect. So things are going to get confusing to the point where it would be difficult to rationally, sequentially say this, first A, then B, then C, then D. It's not that simple. It's like expecting that from the unconscious or the soul, which is not going to work that way. If we isolate only one aspect for discussion, the ordered and sequential presentation is undoubtedly beneficial, but only in part, for we shall have had to forego in the meantime the integral perception and presentation of the particular questions in all its aspects. So when he says, we isolate only one aspect for discussion, the ordered and sequential presentation is undoubtedly beneficial. But of course, what are the critiques of the mental consciousness structure, the rational consciousness structure? It's an inherently limited mode of thought. It's an inherently limited viewpoint. So we're already seeing that manifest. The second difficulty rests in our attempt to elaborate something quote unquote new within the framework and limitations of quote unquote old language. The words and concepts of our present-day language are to a great extent rigidified along the lines of the perspectival world. It is true that the language of poetry, at least, attempts to accommodate itself to the new and novel phenomena striving to take shape, but this is confined mainly to initial indications which, moreover, remain mostly unnoticed. We have endeavored to overcome this obstacle by attempting to loosen up language, taking into account not only the present-day perspectivistic conceptual connotation of the words, but also their integral nature. So this is why the short digression on the unity of primal words, this is why you don't skip that, because any digression in this book is not, it's not irrelevant. It is relevant. It's just a digression. It's a relevant one. So if you missed that for whatever reason, go back and check out the unity of primal words. You'll have a new respect for etymology, and then you'll understand this aspect more. Once again, we would like to summarize various specific characteristics, attributions, and qualities of the respective structures and cross-sections in four groupings. The necessity is particularly acute here since we have been repeatedly forced to allude to certain matters whose clarity and scope become evident only in summary or retrospect. Let us then proceed to recapitulate those things which were not immediately evident from our sequential presentation, and for this the synoptic view, complemented and supplemented by the following cross-sections, will afford us the integral view, the simultaneous presence which is necessarily more or less lacking in our mode of exposition. We shall attempt once more to organize the material under some specific headings, summarizing it in the following four groupings. The basic attitudes of the individual structures, number one, the basic attitudes of the individual structures, as well as their psychic and physical organic emphasis. Number two, the forms of realization and thought. Number three, the forms of expression and manifestation, and the forms of assertion or articulation. Number four, the temporal, social, and general interrelationships which distinguish the individual structures. So these are the 4 points that we will be covering in this video, or I should say in this section. Now, since he mentioned the cross section here, let's show it. Now, hopefully, it'll focus there. So this is the cross section here, and I apologize. Now, again, please feel the need to pause this and Google Gebser's charts. We are on cross section 9 and 10. So we're at the basic attitude and agency of energy. That's number 9, and 10 is organ emphasis. So for the archaic, the basic attitude and agency of energy, origin, is wisdom, and then the organ emphasis, there is none. For the magic, the basic attitude is vital, and the agency of energy is instinct, drive, and emotion. This should all be familiar from our previous discussions on the different consciousness structures. The organ emphasis is the viscera and the ear. He'll explain that. Mythical, the basic attitude is psychic, psychological, And the agency of energy is imagination, sensibility, and disposition. The organ emphasis is the heart and the mouth. Mental. The mental consciousness structure, the basic attitude is cerebral, and the agency of energy is reflection, abstraction, will, and volition. The organ emphasis is the brain and the eye. Integral, basic attitude is integral, and agency of energy is concretion, rendering diaphanous, and virition. The organ emphasis is vertex. We haven't got to that point in the book yet. So now we're going to explain the charts that I just read. We're going to go through why it is that, say, the organ emphasis, the viscera, and the ear, why it is instinct, drive, and emotion, all that stuff. Now, some of this has already been covered, but let's get to it. This summary will present few surprises in the light of what has been said earlier. It will be unnecessary, for example, to elaborate on the vital basis of magic and its guiding force in the conscious weak instinct, its support in drives which can become conscious, and its expression, notably, of identity or identification in emotion. Nor will we need to comment on such attributions as the psychic accentuation of the mythical or the cerebral emphasis of the mental structure. So if you watch the individual videos about the different structures, you already know it's instinct and emotion that drive the magic structure. Of course, the mythical conscious structure was birthed from the discovery of the soul or the psyche, so that's going to be what drives that. And then the mental is objectified space, and it's cerebral, it's mental, it's intellectual, it's abstract. This is always going to say for the summary because, again, you should already know this. Cross-section 10, on the other hand, may at first glance be surprising. So cross-section 9, we're going to talk about it, but we've already kind of summarized that. You guys should know this. But cross-section 10, we're going to explain in a little more detail. Although our ascription to the magic structure of the auditory organ, the ear, which also corresponds to the labyrinth in the cavern, is perhaps evident by now, but the ascription of the viscera to the magic structure is understandable only if we recall several facts. The divining of entrails as a means of foretelling events belongs to the time we have designated as the magical, and its labyrinth aspect is palpably evident. And the homogeneity of the viscera, as well as their essentially non-directional arrangement, definitely place them in relation to the magic vital consciousness. So two things that are really placing the viscera into the magic structure. One of them is the viscera communicate a sense of unity, and it was important in that we know it was important because I don't know what you want to call it, sorcerers at the time or medicine men used the viscera as an object to be divined and to carry the spirit forward. There was some sort of magical or mystical aspect to the viscera, and as he said, the homogeneity of the viscera and the non-directional arrangement that signals a unity there. So he says the viscera simply have a more eminent position within the larger unity of organs in the magic structure. Their functions are more decisive than those of the other organs. How decisive may be discerned from the fact that they served as the source for divining destiny and events for the magicians and medicine men. So that's the other reason why it's so important. Of course, there's magic, the magic consciousness structure. The viscera were that prime source of magic. So that's why the viscera, because it expresses a unity, it also emanates a certain magical force. That's why it's connected to the magical consciousness structure. The magicians, as he said, and the medicine man use the viscera as that foundational source of magic, through which they can do what they do. They do their rituals or their surgeries, if you want to even call it that, whatever it is. We can comprehend this curious procedure, which is only seemingly a nonsensical superstition, by remembering that the viscera represent the intertwined unity which we have ascertained as characteristic of the magic structure of consciousness. So when the viscera is intertwined, again, it's the non-directional aspect. It's not going to be mental. It's not going to be mythical, because what does that have to do with the psyche or the soul? It's going to be magical. Magic Man, actively partaking and completely intertwined in the magic vitality, was surely able to sense a disturbance or indisposition. The immediate occasion for such oracles and prophecies within the visceral texture as it lay spread out before him. For such a display was not only coincidence, since indeed in magic everything is coincidental, not coincidental, co-incidental. So when the entrails or the viscera are laid out before him, he says he was surely able to sense a disturbance or indisposition. So this is sort of the starting point where we need to reattain that unity that is no longer there because the viscera is just kind of spread out. The importance of the ear, on the other hand, derives from the primordial notion of the receptivity of the ear. Sound or tone is procreative. The ear, the projected likeness of the cavern and the labyrinth, is receptive and, consequentially, is parturient. It gives birth to the magic world. So remember, speaking was spell casting, and spell casting cannot be done unless one has unified themselves with the magical forces of the world. So the ear is the organ that assigns order and unity to all the tones, sounds, and hums that they would hear throughout nature. So they would hear bugs or animals or whatever at a higher degree with a higher clarity. This was the organ that is privileged in the magic structure. They must necessarily listen to the world because it acts as the receptor of the external world. It gives birth to the external world because this is the organ that, or the sense that is more developed, being more used. So it acts as that conduit or that gate to the external world. And in aligning yourself with the hums and tunes of the world, you can attain that unity that Magic Man saw. Now, this is going to be some good stuff, okay? Why Gebser is brilliant. I can't remember the exact quote, but Nietzsche said something like, the original person is not who sees the new, it's who sees the old as new. That is what is original, and that is what Gebser, he finds these incredibly profound points in these very small things that I just go over everyone's head. Let's see. 1 second. We can discern the degree to which tone is a primordial force that works via the magic structure to shape the world if we observe the meaning of the Latin word carmen, C-A-R-M-E-N. It signifies a song or poem, but originally meant a religious and magical incantation. So we have the association with song and poem, or association of song and poem with magical incantation, religious and magical. So we have song and poem associated with magic. Singing in this sense is a charm for spell casting, which is to say in affecting by tone or sound. Even today, such words as French charme, C-H-A-R-M-E, Spanish encantado, English charming, are imbued with this basic sense, which expresses the charm or spell that men or objects are able to cast on us. So when I say, when my girlfriend says, "Oh, you're just the most charming man I've ever met. Of course, I would love to be with you," which admittedly every girl has told me that before, so you get used to it. What is he saying? What is she saying? They're saying that there's this magical spell going on here. I've been charmed by your magic, and I am under the woo of your spells. I thought that was super cool, and singing is a way of doing that. So again, these etymological connections that he makes, I think, are just very interesting. Since the relation between tone and spell indicates their inseparability as well as their preeminently magic character, it will not be surprising that we feel justified in ascribing the predominant role within the magic structure to the ear as well as to the inner vital organs. The magic world, as well as an essential part of our present constitution, came forth from the magic tone, which, becoming effective via the ear, evoked a world. We hear the tones, but they're magical. It is the same tone, like that of the jungle drums, whose rhythm is one of the most vital expressions of Magic Man, that gave birth to dance. Dance is tone become visible, the medium of conjuration and of quote-unquote being heard, by their deeper reality of the world where man is united with the rhythm of the universe. Excuse me. When one dances, there is a force within you that must be purged. It must be let out. It must be projected out somewhere. And what he's saying is that Magic Man danced after the sounds, the hums, the tunes came in, and we sort of connected through the ear with the world, the magical world, which in turn created a force which we must dance. It just creates dance. Song and dance and magic are closely connected because they're both around the ear. It's interesting. It says the deeper reality of the world where man is united with the rhythm of the universe. There you go. Whereas the viscera or intestines are evidence of unity or identity, the prefix in means not only in, but also one. The pulse of the heart is an expression of polarity, like the mouth, which can both speak and remain silent. Now we're moving to the mythical organs. So the heart, the boom, 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 that's polarity. Goes in, goes out, goes in, goes out. They don't negate one another, the two halves of a whole of a process. Polarity. We have already spoken of the root kinship of the words myth and mouth, and although etymologists have not as yet demonstrated whether the German word for mouth, Mund, M-U-N-D, can be traced to the same root, mu, we believe nevertheless that we have sufficiently established the primacy of the mouth with respect to the mythical structure. As for the heart, the Gospel of St. Luke 2:19 records, in an appropriately mythical manner, that Mary pondered these words in her heart. Mary pondered these words in her heart. Okay? Remember, the organ emphasis for the mythical is the heart and the mouth. While the Gospel of St. Matthew 12:34 clearly expresses the mythical correspondence and relation between the heart and the mouth, is a good one. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. So the mouth job, according to the mythical structure, is to take what the heart says, silently reflect, and then put to word the forces within you, and to let it out and put it into audible word that can be understood. Even today, we refer to the heart as the organ of courage and disposition. And such phrases as take heart when we mean have courage, and our synonymous use of stout-hearted and courageous are not just coincidences. I think that's so interesting. I think that's, again, these little phrases that we kind of just say. Gebser says, no, this is something more profound. Even apart from this, Kreuzer's somewhat willful etymology, which relates mythos with the German word Gemut, mind, heart, disposition, is not entirely far-fetched. Whereas in the mythical structure, one ponders or holds something in one's heart, we speak today in the mental structure of keeping an eye on something. Again, an expression that is most likely not just coincidental. This turn of speech is merely one of the subtle hints suggestive of the primacy of the eye, which comes to dominate the mental structure. So we have the heart and the mouth. In the mythical structure, now we're moving the brain and the eye, the tools needed for measurement. The perspectival world is primarily visual, just as the unperspectival is primarily sensorial and the pre-perspectival primarily emotional. But the perspectival world is at the same time the world of thought, just as the unperspectival was a world of contemplation and the pre-perspectival one of hearing. In the world of thought, in the mental structure, it is the brain which is the primary inner organ. Once again, the close relationship of the mental to the magic structure is evident, for the brain too has the nature of a labyrinth. As long as its function remains dominant, thinking will be unable to escape from its ambiguity despite its attempts to elude it. Now, we're going to skip ahead to we're on page 146. We're going to skip to page 257 because I'm a little ahead of you guys, of course, and now we're into the section of the different forms of realization and thought, and we're going to, why specifically are the eyes necessary for the mental consciousness structure? Read this, okay? Let's see. Okay. He says, without losing sight of the vertical, let us confine our observation to the horizontal form since it lends itself more readily to a graphic depiction. In this visual triangle, the eyes form the base and complete the synthesis of their simultaneous perception at the perspectival vanishing point. The synthesis is possible because of the trivalent or triadic relationship of the triangle, which not only opens up, but also closes at the vanishing point. In this process, the points formed by the eye become antinomies in the wake of an increasing intellectualization. And these antinomies meet their opposites at the vanishing point like two statements completed by a third. So remember, mental consciousness structure, rationality, how it brings objects in the world into relation with each other. One thing that's quantifiably measurable and consciously known, and positing it to dualistic something else of the same substance but different form. Then we invoke the third act of measuring thought to posit a directed judgment, either synthesizing or privileging one of the binaries. So we have 1, 1, triangle, right? Base of the triangle, top of the triangle. What's happened here? The eyes form the base, and as perspective looks into the camera, they are reconciled. So we have the base of the triangle, our eyes, and then we have the top of the triangle, the vanishing point, which allows us to reconcile through simultaneously perceiving of the two different eyes so they can combine them into, I could say, hey, I'm looking at my computer right now. That is why the eye is associated with the mental structure, because quite frankly, once you understand, if mental consciousness structure was birthed from the discovery of perspectivity, the ability to render 3D objects on a 2D flat surface, then it sort of follows that you're going to find that same way of bringing objects in the world into relation with each other in the eye, right? The perspectival way of doing it. I thought that was fascinating personally, but maybe not. Let's see. He said this 11th grouping is a cross-section through the forms of realization and thought of the respective structures, which will be amended and completed in the course of the remaining discussion. Hold on, let me see just 1 second real quick. Okay. So in 11, here's the new cross-section. I apologize again, it's not exactly perfect. You can see it? No. Just pause and look it up. You'll see it. Okay. So we have forms of realization and thought. That's A, the basis. So in archaic, there's none. And B, the mode is originary. So the forms of realization and thought, the basis for the magic is empathy and identification, hearing. Its mode is pre-rational, pre-causal, analogical. For the mythical structure, its basis is imagination and utterance. So the basis of realizing thought, or basis of the different forms of realization in the mythical structure, is imagination and utterance. Heart, mouth. Contemplation and voicing. Its mode is irrational, non-causal, and polar. This is not rational, but it got the job done. Now in the mental, take a guess. Its basis for the forms of realization and thought is conceptual, conceptualization and reflection, seeing and measuring. Remember the eye, the base of the triangle, boom. And the mind can measure as well. The eye and the brain and the intellect can measure. It's rational, causal, directed, and then integral is concretion and integration, volition and transparency. Its mode is arational, acausal, integral. So it doesn't have to do with, I missed something. No. Doesn't really have to do it. It does have to do with rationality, but we'll get there. We'll get there. It will be found that these ascriptions hold true when they are also read horizontally and considered together with the other attributions, a task which is facilitated by the synoptic table printed at the end of the volume. The magic structure is more or less characterized by the unitary empathy and sense of identification and identity basic to it, just as the mythical structure is characterized by the polar complements of imagination and utterance, contemplation or vision, and vocalization or voicing inherent in myth. So remember, identity with magic. That's a unity there. It exists kind of on its own. Everything has been consolidated into that one identity. Whereas myth, polar complementary. It posits two things, right? Not just singular identity. There's two things. It could be good and evil. It could be, as he just said, imagination and utterance. These are polar complements. I imagine the myth and then I utter the myth. That's the mythical structure. The basis of the rational form of thought is expressed by the antithesis of conceptualization and reflection, as in Forstellan and Noctican, with their respective suggestion of before and after, as well as by seeing and measuring. That's the key. That's the key for rational thought. We see and we measure. Quantifiably measurable, and it's consciously known. Go watch my rational videos. As for the attributions, actually we'll skip out. He says, it is of fundamental importance that we clearly distinguish between irrational and arational, for this distinction lies at the very heart of our deliberations. Arationality has nothing to do with irrationality. Our only connection exists in the fact that arationality is not possible without irrationality, or for that matter, without the pre-rational or the irrational. All three form the basis of irrationality. So irrationality is not irrationality. Don't fall into the rationalist dualism of we have rationality on one hand, so it must necessarily be irrationality on the other in a dualistic way. Not true. You can have that, but that's fine. But I'm going to transcend to arationality. And arationality is a separate concept or idea than irrationality. Irrationality is non-causal. It's polar. It, simply put, doesn't make any sense. Irrationality is without rationality. It is outside the bounds of rational thought. It is the man who has been taken out of the water, recognizes what's happening, and he throws himself back in, or he just stays out. He's outside the bounds of it, right? He goes, no, I'm not going to deploy rational thought here because I've transcended it. I've discerned in this area of the world it's not useful, so I'm not going to deploy it. There you go. Let's see. It is only natural that the rational mind will find it difficult to grasp this basic distinction between the two, for its quantitative means are hardly applicable to the realization of the transparent, irrational structure. The rationalists will perhaps mistakenly confuse the lack of measurability characteristic of diaphaneity with the unfathomability of the irrational. So when you explain to a rationalist, no, I am rendering transparent, I am rendering diaphanous, I am seeing through the structures, through the world, and I can witness the core, the ever-present origin. That's immeasurable. That's not going to fly in a rationalist. A rationalist will never accept that. Because they have not transcended to where I have, they will immediately say, that's irrational. No, your categorization of what I just said as irrational, that's the irrational thing, my friend. I am being irrational, and I have transcended your deficient mode of thought. So no. So don't let the rationalists say that. When you try to explain integral theory, they'll derive that as irrational. You say no. It's not irrational, it's irrational. It's outside the bounds, not necessarily hostile to it or antithetical to it, just outside the bounds. There is, of course, no proof that we are even justified in speaking of a lack of measurability with respect to the diaphanon, for it may well be that diaphaneity is free of measure. However, we may wish to define it. Irrationality is never identifiable with irrationality or pre-rationality. There is a fundamental distinction between the attempt to go beyond the merely measurable, knowing and respecting it while striving to be free from it, and rejecting and disregarding the measurable by regressing to the immoderate and unfathomable chaos of the ambivalent and even fragmented polyvalence of psychic and natural interrelations. This will be the last thing we leave off on today, and I will repeat for emphasis because this first sentence is a great way to just sort of sum up our desire to transcend rationalism. There is a fundamental distinction between the attempt to go beyond the merely measurable, knowing and respecting it while striving to be free from it. That is whatever you want to call it. Irrationality, anti-rationalism, that is a great way of describing it, okay? Knowing and respecting what is measurable, but not being confined to it, enslaved to it. He says, and rejecting and disregarding the measurable by regressing to the immoderate and unfathomable chaos of the ambivalent and even fragmented polyvalence of psychic and natural interrelations. You don't go backwards. You don't go back into irrationality, especially not deficient irrationality. That's a recipe for disaster. You go forward. You progress forward and you transcend. That's what you do. Not this week. Everything's rationality or irrationality, and if you start, it's funny. I'll argue with some of these rationalist guys, and I'll give them Gebser. I'm essentially giving them what I'm giving you, and maybe a little bit of a shorter version, but nonetheless, it's still effective. So I'll never forget this one guy at the bar. Oh my god, I went on for like 15 minutes straight, like 10 to 15 minutes, just laying it out. I laid out all the magic, the mythical, the mental, all of it. Especially, I focused on the deficient aspects of rationalism. And what do I get in response? It's meaningless word salad. Okay. So people keep telling me that. So I say, okay, let me break down this stuff to its essence. I'm not going to give the spiels. I'm just going to give the very basic points of what rationality is, how it functions, why it's wrong. Boom, you're done in a minute. That's vague. That's too reductive. That's niche. That's not. You have to understand. You have to have patience because people will not. The rationalists have built a wall of security, and you have a new tool at your disposal, and you are breaking down that wall, and you're breaking down that wall because you have to, because you need to get the person trapped in that cave up, or he's going to fall and die and starve out. But that's a scary feeling when you have your metaphysical foundations and views picked apart. So when you argue with the rationalists, what you do is you make it clear that yes, I am breaking down your safety cave here, but what I'm doing is I'm offering you a way out. I'm taking you out of the river so I can put you into the ocean, right? So you're comfortable in the river. You've acclimatized yourself to the river. You have a routine. You know where everything is. Great. The problem is the bears are coming in the river. Now you're going to have a problem. I'm trying to take you out of the river throw you into the ocean where you could have a better chance of survival, even though it's vaster and greater and more difficult to circumnavigate. Nonetheless, it's necessary. They are the fish who doesn't want to be taken out of the river. They want to be swimming into the jaws of the bear. I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to say, no, 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 no. There's room out in the ocean. So that's what you have to do with rationalists. You have to recognize that they're not going to react well when you break down their foundations. But that's when you extend your arm and you say, now let me show you integral consciousness, which respects rationality but is not enslaved to it. And that's a good thing because it's deficient and yada, 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 yada. So that's my sort of way of dealing with rationalists. And there's some good stuff. I think we'll end it here today. Next week we'll figure out, next week we'll finish out this section. We'll probably finish out the concluding summary because that's just a couple pages as well. And then we will be into, let's see, the space-time constitution of the structures. That's going to be fun. Everything is pretty profound here going forward, and I still think this is pretty profound. So thank you guys so much. You guys are the best. I hope to see you guys soon, and I hope you're thriving. Thank you guys.